Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am so excited for today's episode because we have got an amazing entrepreneur for you to learn from here today. This is someone who not only loves the stuff that he does, which you're going to see, he has got some incredible skills from an amazing professional career that he's rolled into his own company, and he helps so many other businesses make strides forward when it comes to the technology that powers growth and scalability. But on top of that, he actually loves the mindset stuff. He really loves and embraces the entire essence of what it means to be an entrepreneur. So we're all going to learn a lot from today's guest. His name is Ivan Smirnov. Ivan is a forward-thinking technology executive with a passion for scaling startups and building next-generation platforms. With a career spanning roles at Google, Elude, and Smirnov Labs, Ivan has architected systems used by billions, literally billions, and coached founders to align technical execution with their business vision. Through his work at Smirnov Labs, he partners with entrepreneurs to transform their startups into thriving, scalable businesses. So much fun stuff that we're going to get into today. So I'm excited about this one. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Ivan Smirnov. All right, Ivan, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian. Such a genuine pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Yes, honestly, likewise. Listeners always love a little bit of behind the scenes. You and I have exchanged some voice memos before getting on this call today, and I've researched your business and the work that you do. We've exchanged many emails, so this is a ton of fun. Let's kick things off by going beyond the bio. Who's Ivan? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Fantastic question. It's really funny how life works out. As Steve Jobs said, you can never connect the dots looking forward. It's only when you turn around, look behind you, you see how it happened. So my journey to entrepreneurship actually started much earlier than even I sometimes remember. Specifically, I was 16, living in Los Altos, California, the heart of Silicon Valley. And through my school program, we had this really nifty partnership with a partnership called Junior Achievement. And essentially, it's a program that takes teenagers, sticks a bunch of them in one room, and has them create a company from scratch. So we ended up deciding to create duct tape wallets and, bought a bunch of duct tape. Everyone pitched in. We started ramping up production. And as part of that process, we actually had to set up a corporate structure to incorporate, issue stock, and set up leadership positions. So I ended up running and winning the co-presidency with another gentleman, and we spearheaded the company together. And that was my very first exposure to figuring out marketing, understanding conversion rates, and all those other fun aspects. And from there, it's kind of been this fun relationship with entrepreneurship where I took some time to, go to UC Berkeley, get a degree, strategically go to Google to kind of learn from the best in the industry. And then I pivoted back into the startup space to start to apply those learnings and actually build out cool technology and just play. I mean, that's really what life is, right? You're here to optimize fun, to learn, to grow, and to build. And I've been blessed enough to have those opportunities to really ramp up, learn, and then start applying them to real companies and helping other folks achieve their dreams.
Yeah, I love that overview, Ivan. There's so many things that we're going to unpack in today's episode, but I want to start with the fact that it seems like you were so intentional about your career growth, about your skill development, obviously about the environments that you enjoy. You bring up play, that you clearly enjoy working in and operating within. I want to hear some of those insights because you working within the world of startups, you've been at, let's call it the biggest startup in the world, which is, of course, Google. We don't think of it as a startup these days, but part of their magic is they've encapsulated that startup environment at scale, at the enterprise level. What are some of those things that you've seen inside the world of Google and these other startups that you think contribute to a really scalable and successful and impactful environment?
Absolutely great question. So one of the main reasons I decided to go to Google after graduating was the way I look at it is Google is effectively an industrial PhD where you are there, you are building products that are serving literally billions of users. And it was a wonderful opportunity to learn from the very best and see the epitome and pinnacle of 16, 20, 25 years of engineering with the best minds on the planet. So one of the things that they do really well over there is a really methodical approach to the products that they build. And the biggest value that they instilled in me that I actually apply in my other platforms as well is focusing on the user. Because oftentimes as engineers, we're artists in the soul. We want to build cool things. We want to bring them to the world. And oftentimes we end up creating solutions in search of a problem. And by putting focus on the user, you're putting on the hat of a person who might not have your situation in life, your skill set, or your approach to things. And you're really asking yourself, what can I build that will serve this person in this particular persona? How do I make this easy for them, understandable? How do I have this deliver value? And I think that's one of the things that Google has done incredibly well over the decades is having this strong focus on the user. You end up optimizing products that actually truly delight rather than just squeezing out shareholder value. And I've tried to apply the same mindset during my time at Elude and now Smirnov Labs with the consulting and coaching that I'm doing with my partners, where we're talking about, okay, what are we building? Who are we building it for? How do we make this absolutely delightful?
Yeah, really well said. I want you to go deeper there because it's not often we see someone with your technical prowess and your love for technology, but it seems like maybe equally or even more so, you love the human side of things. You love that solution focus, and technology appears to be merely the vehicle through which you deliver these transformations, these solutions, this growth that you're after. Talk to me about that balance because it must be rare, Ivan. You must be aware of how rare of a breed that you are in this world.
Thank you so much for those kind words. You're absolutely correct. I think that a lot of times as engineers, we want to build incredibly cool things, and we get so deep into the technical side that, with engineering, we have our own terminology for everything. And the cool part about the engineering parlance, as you say, is we can condense information fidelity so much that if I just say a single word, like, okay, BGP issues, that conveys 3 weeks of headache and an understanding of who I am, the problems that I faced, but means absolutely nothing to someone who's not in the technology space. So over the course of my career, I've really been thinking about the human aspect as well, because if we just build really, really cool technology, sometimes it can almost end up isolating folks who are not in the technical space. And that's not what I want to do, because in my eyes, technologists are like modern day wizards. We are building floating castles in the sky, but unlike, a painting that is beautiful to look at and evokes emotion, the castles that we build, they do stuff. Like, how cool is that? We have a computer chip, which when you think about it is silicon, it's sand. We are talking about sand that is thinking, that I can take concepts and actions that I want this sand to do, say some magic words, and then something happens, like a light turns on, or the system talks back to me, or I have something painted on the screen. When you stop and think about it, it's absolutely magical. And the question that I like to ask myself is, okay, how do we turn that magic into everyday joy? We've seen this with Apple with the iPhone, right? We have a brick of glass and sand that brings so much value to folks with photography, with images, with connection. And I really always had this strong passion to figure out, how do we make life for humans better? And this kind of also pivots into some of my interests with, singularity and the potential merging of technology and humans in the future. But it's really a question of, okay, how do we build cool technology that makes life more fun for everyone and kind of lets everyone else be the magicians? We're sort of seeing that come through these days with, for example, self-driving cars, right? You put in a destination, you get driven somewhere. You tell that to someone 50 years ago, that would sound like absolute magic. And yet here we are. So I find so much love and passion for building things that matter to people. That's the reason that with a lot of the clients that I work with, we're building consumer-focused applications. It might still be B2B, but it's still people looking at it. There's a reason I'm not going deep into, let's say, some of the work that the hedge funds are doing, because I am more interested in bringing magical delight into the hands of everyone.
Ivan, so much goodness in there. It reminds me, societally, we always say that term of with great power comes great responsibility. What I'm hearing from you today is you're obviously a very big dreamer, and we're going to get into the mindset stuff behind an incredible entrepreneur like you in just a little bit. But where I go with that is that you have great powers. There's so many things that you can bring out of thin air. You're talking about the artistry behind it, and that makes me think about with great powers also comes a lot of question marks. And I think the hardest thing to work with is truly a blank slate. You have a blank canvas in front of you, and yeah, sure, figuring out the problems is one thing, and then even understanding the solution is one thing, but creating the picture, creating the thing from scratch, using a keyboard, using a computer, a bunch of ones and zeros, how the heck do you navigate that? Because there's so much, you said, artistry in between. There's a million different ways to solve these problems. How do you start channeling all of those different powers into focus, into a solution, into something that you can actually build?
Absolutely great question. So I think it's a two-part answer, the ethical side and then the strategic side. Let me start with the strategic. So A really important aspect of this is thinking about the problem in a structured manner, right? So if someone says, build me an application that does X, Y, and Z, I could jump right in and start writing code, but I want to understand the structure and the nuance and the interaction between the person and the product or solution that they're building. So we need to understand, how are folks using it? What is the value that they're getting out of it? What does a system load look like on the servers? How do we keep the costs down for the user, for the person? How do we think about the overall experience? And what's interesting is, in order to really succeed in the space, at least in the technical side of things, is it requires a massive breadth of knowledge. And the cultivation of that breadth of knowledge is something that I've really strategically approached over the course of my career, because oftentimes folks will specialize in one particular domain, but it means that they don't understand the other aspects that are also part of the overarching solution. So specifically, if someone is really good, let's say with front-end development, they might write amazing UIs that will wreak absolute hell on the backend server due to misconfigured load. Same thing with the backend systems. We might have an amazing backend system, but if you don't think about the security, it's going to get hacked, and now your client data is gone and potentially your code base as well. So I like to look at things holistically, kind of using airplane analogies, right? Like, let's look at the 30,000 foot view. What is the shape of the problem overall? Are we flying over a lake, an island, a country? What is it? Then we kind of get one level lower. What are the components that we're building? How do the different cities connect each other with the roads? And then one level down, we can start talking about the architecture of the cities and think, okay, if the person is walking here and there, or in our example, if they're using this application, how easy is it to get to where they need to be to do the things they want to do? And it kind of requires this interesting jump from the lower levels to the higher levels and back, because when you're building something, you're trying to optimize for the folks building the thing, the business owner who might need some insights, and at the same time the needs of the consumer, while respecting their privacy, charging a reasonable rate, making sure that it's scalable. And that kind of pivots into the ethical side. So you're absolutely right. The power of programmers and just tech in general, it is insane. We build systems that people carry in their pockets, that have the ability to bring great value, or, to be honest, great pain with some of the things we've been seeing with social media or some of the other aspects. And I think it's really up to each individual developer to decide where their fine lines are. There are certain companies that have reached out to me that wanted me to work with them, that for personal reasons, due to my moral code, I actually politely declined, because I don't believe in the technology that they're building. I don't want to support the pervasive surveillance and some of the other darker things that they were attempting to build. And I don't want to be involved. And if anything, I will be on the other side of that battle, where I will tell everyone about ad blockers. I will tell folks how to secure their systems, because I don't believe in having technology have such deep roots into people's lives in such an invasive manner. I think it needs to be a trade-off, where if folks are giving their data to a platform, they need to understand that they're giving that data and have a very clear trade-off of, okay, I'm giving this data, but I'm getting something back. Case in point, I have my Google Maps history turned on because it is convenient to me to remember where I've been, when I've been there last, and have the algorithm optimize my routes. Other platforms, I'll disable my location sharing because they don't need to know. So it's a very personal decision.
Yeah, not only that, Ivan, but what I'm hearing from you is really that blend of strategic and tactical thinking. This is something that I so admire in great CEOs and great founders and great entrepreneurs, is that ability to zoom in and zoom out. And I want to go there with you, because it just seems to me like, even whether we're talking about business, whether we're talking about technology, you recognize that difference between strategy and tactics. And the best way that I ever saw it described was from the world of chess, where a grandmaster once said, strategy is knowing what to do when there's nothing to do. Tactics are knowing what to do when there's something to do. If there's a piece on the board, tactically, you take the free piece. But strategically, what's that longer term vision? Talk to me about how that factors into the way that you think, because I'm fascinated not just by how you think and what you think, but I really want to understand that the way that you think.
That is a really, really good question. I think the initial approach to that is to cultivate the intensity of your focus, because where you put your time and attention is incredibly important. And it's almost a battle with yourself, because, to your point, tactically, there are certain parts of my job that I love that if I had the opportunity, I would spend all day hacking on this one piece, but that wouldn't really drive the overall benefit. So I think realistically, it comes down to keeping in mind the broader picture and understanding why are you even doing this? Because if you think about it, with entrepreneurship, you have to be insane to be an entrepreneur. I'll be honest, you really do, because you're taking something incredibly uncertain, you're placing all your bets on it. And, the old joke goes, quit your, 40-hour job week to become 100 hours a week as an entrepreneur. So there's a reason you're putting all this time and effort into it. And it requires a lot of discipline to think, okay, where do I need to strategically shore things up? And then where can I pop up and essentially let go of some of the perfectionism? And I find that that's one of the useful kind of benchmarks that I can use is when I notice that I'm getting something to the state of perfect, and it's a lower level item in the overall picture, it means I'm spending too much time on it. And I'll be honest, it hurts because I can be a perfectionist and I want to make sure everything is at 100%. But at the end of the day, you have to keep in mind the broader picture. And usually it involves balancing the business objectives with the physical realities of your situation. Because no matter what business you're in, you have finite time, money, or headcount. One of those factors is usually limited. Even a behemoth like Google, they're bounded by time. There's certain things that just take time to do. If you're a tiny startup, you're bounded by time. So it comes down to the ruthless prioritization where you have your goal in mind, it aligns with your values and what you're trying to build, and everything else that is secondary, you have to consciously deprioritize. And the hardest part about that is typically the things that are on your list, they're not actually bad things. They're objectively useful task items that will deliver value. But the key is learning how to say no to the good things so you can have the time and energy to say yes to the great things.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Such important entrepreneurial lessons. And that's why, Ivan, I always tell people I have the coolest job in the world because I get to talk to amazing entrepreneurs every single day. And with that in mind, what I really appreciate about the way that you show up in the world is not just as a subject matter expert, but you're also one of us. I always remind that fact to listeners because they're listening to you talk about these solutions and technology and all of these important topics. But at the same time, you're also growing your business. So when I hear you talk about limited resources, limited headcount, limited time, these are real life challenges that you also face in your own work. Talk to me about some of that because you've already introduced us to some of the mindset behind it. For you, it's perfectionism. Ivan, what are those real life considerations that you sit with as you think about the impact that you want to make in this world through your work, as well as growing your own business, as well as, of course, helping your clients grow as well?
Absolutely great question. I think it really comes down to incredible resource management. And when I say that, I'm actually applying that to my entire life. There's a reason that a lot of the successful entrepreneurs that we know, they have an incredible gym schedule, they're sleeping well, they're eating well. Because the first thing you have to prioritize is making sure that this machine, this carbon body that you are in, is optimized as much as possible. Because if you're underfed, you're not healthy, and you're not sleeping well, it's going to be incredibly hard to have clarity of thought and focus on the things that matter. The second aspect is discipline. I have an absolutely insane calendar. It's hard to show over a podcast naturally, but I have every single half an hour chunk of my day planned out. And what this does for me is it is incredible freedom because it looks crazy, but at the same time, whenever an event comes in, I'll put it into the future and then I'll forget about it. And then I have the time and energy to kind of move into all of this. So you have to prioritize, you have to make sure that the fundamentals are there. And then when it comes to growing a business, you have to remember that anytime you make a decision, you are making a vote with your time, with your energy. Right now, I am here with you. This is the single most important thing that I'm doing right now. I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm fully present. After this, I'll have something else and I'll be fully present there. So if you're half-assing it where you're sitting on a meeting but you're thinking about something else, you're not present. You're going to lose efficiency. So having the clarity of thought, having the focus to be present, and the fundamental understanding that you've picked the most important thing you could possibly do for this day, that really drives huge value, which again kind of highlights the fact of prioritization. Any entrepreneur will tell you they probably have 30 hours worth of tasks for a day and you only have 10, 12, 16 hours, however long it is that you're working. And if you're not prioritizing correctly, you'll be questioning yourself and you'll be working on the wrong things. So having the clarity to understand what is the most important thing I need to be doing right now and fully committing to that is incredibly important. And to put some kind of tactical spins on it, it's also important who you hire. So hiring people, oftentimes, there have been times where I have turned down free talent. I had an intern approach me and they're like, hey, well, can I work for you? I'll do it for free. I had to say no. The reason being is because the time I would spend on coaching and up-leveling that intern would not yield me an ROI on the value that they would bring. This was essentially kind of volunteer time on my side where I could up level them, but it wouldn't serve my business. And while I'm a huge fan of volunteering and mentoring, at that time I didn't have the capacity, so I had to say no. And some of my best hires are the folks who can take a situation, analyze it, and come to me with answers. Because if you have an employee that comes to you and says, hey, this isn't working and this sucks, that's useful information, but you probably already know that because you're looking at your business. The really key hires that you can find are people who will look at a problem, go do some research, come up with 3 scenarios, and come to you and present those scenarios and let you make a choice. Scenario A costs this much of time, money, and effort. Scenario B is less, but it has these trade-offs. Scenario C is this, but it has those other trade-offs. And my recommendation is scenario B. And what that means is now you've successfully delegated not just the task itself, but the reasoning and motivation and understanding behind a solution to that task to an employee who then comes to you and lets you pick. And those folks are very hard to find, but man, when you find them, they're worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, I love that perspective and these real life stories from you, Ivan, because what I'm hearing when you talk about being fully present, it's why I avoid switching costs. Everyone always asks me how we manage a 5-day-a-week show, and I tell them, for example, my typical recording day is Tuesdays. When I wake up on Tuesday, I'm only in one track of mind. I'm only focusing on interviews that day. And so I'm not thinking about the email that's going to throw my day off. I'm not thinking about scrolling through social media. None of those things even factor into my mind. So I don't have those switching costs, which allows me to perform at my best in interviews. And along those lines, what I think that's fascinating about the way you talk about your schedule and being present in all of those things is it's not just about having it on your calendar, Ivan. It's having the discipline to stick to it. That's what I find. Having talked to as many entrepreneurs as I have is everyone can tell themselves what they're going to do today, but you have the ability to follow through. Talk to me about that lack of deviation, because let's face it, you and I both exist in a world where things change, fires happen in different capacities, whether it's business or life. How do you manage those things while also being incredibly disciplined about what you've decided you want to get done?
I love that question. So here is the ultimate hack that works for me. You have to think about this where right now we are in the present moment, but there is a series of past me's that led to this moment, and there's a series of future me's that follows from this moment. And past you and future you need to be on your mind and to be your 2 best friends. Because oftentimes the pattern that we see is a negative spiral where present you is paying down the debts of past you who maybe didn't sleep, stayed up too late, didn't hit the gym, ate some junk, and you're paying down the debts of the past and you don't have the energy to invest in the future, which means tomorrow when future you wakes up, present you hasn't done anything for them. And you're in a negative spiral where you're constantly paying off old debts. If you shift the mindset to thinking about future you as your absolute best friend and your past you as your kind of younger self that you're approaching with love and understanding, it changes everything, because now you're cashing in on the favors and the buildup and the foundational work that past you has done, and you're collecting that and you're investing in future you. And I'm thinking about this almost on a daily basis because, of course, sometimes I look at my calendar and I just want to say, I'm not doing this. I don't want to do this. But then I understand that means that past me will have double the work, future me will have double the workload the next day because of something I didn't do today. And it's that willpower and understanding that I'm not just accountable to myself, because it's easy to lie to yourself and be like, it's just me. I'm accountable to this other entity, this future me, this person who I love that I'm doing everything in my life for to build a better future for them. How could I possibly backstab them? So of course, I'm usually dead tired at the end of the day. I will still go to the gym because that is an investment for future me. And now, having been going to the gym for some time, I appreciate the effort of past me that's done that. So maintaining that relationship, it is so important because every single action that we take, it's a vote for a future. And, there's some graphics floating around on the internet. If you improve by 1% a day, 1.01 to the 365th power, that is a 37x return. If you even take a tiny 1% step every day, you'll be 37 times better off in a year than you were today. And the inverse of that is if you lose a percent a day. Seems not significant, just a percent. What could possibly go wrong? Well, 0.99 to the 365th, that is 3%. You will lose 33 times your resource if you lose just 1% a day over the course of a year. So you have to vote with your actions. You have to think about what's next and what's coming up.
Boom. I'm going to use that as a natural segue, Ivan, to talk about the future, because obviously in your line of work, you're not just looking at current technologies, but you're always looking at that technological time horizon. And here we are at the beginning of a brand new year. So much is going to change here in 2025. And Ivan, I certainly can't imagine. I hope that you can imagine a little bit more than I can from my vantage point. What's to come this year? We've got AI as a big player. There's going to be so many new things on the horizon with regards to the way that social media works, the way that the web works, the way that our mobile devices work. Ivan, what is it that you're looking at ahead of this brand new year?
Great question. The thing that gets me the most excited is, of course, AI. And here's the thing. AI has had a very interesting history. It actually has been around much longer than folks realize. We kind of had this initiative start in the 60s and kind of really doubled down in the 80s. And in the 80s, folks were talking, okay, AI will be here any year now. And of course, they had no clue how hard that is. But what's interesting about AI is we've had a few waves. We had that wave in the 80s, we had the deep learning wave of the 2010s, and now we're sort of in this large language model wave yet again. The reason I think that this one is going to be it is we have the computational power to back the compute that's needed for LLMs to essentially start to pass the Turing test and provide realistic behavior. At this point, most folks are using ChatGPT on a daily basis. It's still lacking in creativity and it's lacking the soul of consciousness, but functionally it is now acting almost like a person. And it's absolutely fascinating to think about what the future holds, because if you look at the exponential growth of computation, you and I are absolutely young enough that we will see most likely the rise of true artificial general intelligence. Now, there's of course a philosophical debate of what is the magical spark that derives consciousness. Personally, I think it has to do with some potentially quantum coherence questions or maybe something more mystical like the soul. But at the end of the day, LLMs are getting better and better every single day. And there's some really fascinating questions coming up that I'm starting to chat about with my peers, specifically around the stewardship of AI. And I don't mean that purely in a sense of control. I'm thinking about this more from a systemic perspective. Right now, humanity is the dominant race on this planet, the dominant being. We are getting close to creating artificial beings that at some point may have interests that diverge from humanity's. And there's a few different scenarios there, because if we just create them and let them run loose, it depends who created them and the values that they have, and that will determine their actions. Because if we encode kind of the capitalistic resource maximization fundamental values into these AI systems, they're going to want more compute, more access, more data, more power, whatever it is. And if we encode those values, then the future can definitely be interesting. We can see why, folks like Musk are worried about what it holds. My take on it is I want to be involved in this AI race, but treat this more like an upbringing of a child, where if we bring up AI with values that matter to us, like kindness, companionship, giving, altruism, then even if those AIs surpass us in cognitive capacity and in resource gathering, because of the values alignment, they'll end up uplifting and helping the human race. So very much an open question and lots to dig into.
Yeah, Ivan, I want to go here. And obviously, listeners know part of the beauty behind this show is it's completely on the spot. You weren't prefaced with any questions, and we're just going wherever the conversation takes us. With that in mind, one thing I've always been fascinated with, we always talk about this in marketing circles, about the gold rush and how a lot of people were moving west here in the United States to go find that gold and chase that gold. Whereas so many great startups realized, rather than chasing this elusive gold, I'm going to sell things to the gold miners that will help them. I'm going to sell pickaxes to the gold miners. Levi's Jeans said, I'm going to start selling really rugged and resilient jeans to the people who are mining for gold every single day. What's your take on that? Because there's this entire ecosystem that's being propped up by new tech and by AI. What's in your mind the equivalent of that gold rush and selling pickaxes to miners?
Really good question. The immediate answer that comes to mind is cloud hosting providers and GPU creators, where, for the fundamental compute to run these AI workloads, it's the cloud players that win. But we're also seeing a lot of downstream creativity that is really interesting. I think there's been, hundreds, if not thousands, of sites and apps launched recently that build on ChatGPT and various other LLM providers to start building apps that weren't possible before. There's a fitness app that I use that now does meal analysis, and that wasn't possible a few years ago because now you just snap a photo, and I'm pretty sure they just feed it to an LLM that does some image recognition and tries to derive the nutritional value in there. So we're seeing a lot of creativity. I think it's going to be just like we saw with DeFi and crypto, where there's this huge wave of creativity, and we're sort of seeing kind of Darwinian evolution in the marketplace of tech, where a lot of the weak ideas that create weak companies will simply go bankrupt and die out, but the good ideas will remain. And it's a natural part of the process. I mean, it's kind of this boom where everyone is trying things, and then a small bust where all the bad ideas fade out. But I see this as a positive, where if we had every single idea that ever is created live on, it would really muddy up the space. So it's important to kind of clean things up. The last company that I ran, Elude, we had a fascinating idea. We ultimately did not make it because it just wasn't our time, and our execution wasn't as good as it could potentially be. And, obviously it's unfortunate when a company that you run doesn't make it, but it also means the market is stronger because folks can see what we tried. They know that doesn't work, and they can do a different take on it. So it's kind of similar with AI. We're going to see a huge wave. I think in probably 2-ish years, it'll settle down a little bit, but the good ideas will remain, and it'll most likely transition to kind of a companion in your pocket that can do useful things for you, like we see with Apple Intelligence, with ChatGPT, and with the other solutions coming out.
Boom. So many considerations, so many things that are going to change our lives. And Ivan, it's so cool to get inside the mind of a founder and an entrepreneur and a leader who's helping to be part of this new wave. So huge kudos to you. All of this good entrepreneurial talk makes me so excited to ask you this question that I ask at the end of every interview, because it's super broad and I have no idea which way you're going to go with this. And that is your one best piece of advice, that one takeaway, knowing that we're being listened to by entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different levels of their own personal and business growth journeys. What's that one thing that you want to leave them with today?
The very best advice I can give you is approach your decisions with utmost conviction and align them on your values. Because when you make a decision, you don't have the benefit of hindsight. You don't know how it's going to turn out. But what you can do is you can think about your values. And if you don't know what your values are, you should really go and figure that out. Understand what it is that you're optimizing for. Is it time? Is it money? Is it learning, freedom, adventure, whatever that is? And make the best decision possible that takes you on a path forward. Because if you have stagnation, there's no motion, you're not going to grow. Continue growing, continue evolving, and trust yourself to make the best decision possible with the information that you have. And you're never going to have perfect information, and that's okay. But as long as you give it your best shot, you're going to 100% end up in a better place than where you were.
Boom. So beautifully articulated, Ivan. I could listen to you talk about all of these big things and big considerations all day long. And that's why I think your clients are so fortunate to have you on board. And I'd love for you to talk about Smirnov Labs in just a second. But I want to personally say the fact that if someone's listening to this and thinking, gosh, how I wish I had a CTO like Ivan, someone who thinks about the world this way, someone who thinks about technology this way. That's why businesses like Smirnov Labs exists, is to give these powers, these thoughts, this experience. This isn't someone who lives inside of one company. It's someone who's working across a bunch of different industries, the SaaS space, the invention space, working in so many cool projects. That's why Ivan brings to the table all of these unique perspectives and future looking perspectives as well. So Ivan, I hope I did your work a little bit of justice with that overview, but I'd love for you to tell listeners more about Smirnov Labs and drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Thank you so much. So Smirnov Labs is at Smirnov, Smirnov Labs, Labs.com. And there's a contact page. I'm also on LinkedIn, LinkedIn/in, and then just Smirnov, Smirnov. And the reason Smirnov Labs was created is there's a huge gap in CTO leadership, where a lot of the small companies might not have the resources or connections to source a full-time CTO. So there's a strong need for this fractional CTO space where you have a trusted technical partner who has your interest at heart. And because of the nature of the engagement, there's flexibility where I'm putting your business first, and I'm actually working with a client right now where I'm offboarding myself because we've hired a full-time CTO for them. So I'm a partner that can come in, I can help you set up your technology, get your dev team on track, get your strategic roadmaps in place, and then figure out how to staff your team towards ultimate success.
Yes, I love that overview, Ivan. Listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find all of those links down below in the show notes. If you are, whether you've got an idea, you've got funding, whether you're already making revenue, that's the beautiful thing about the different gaps that Ivan's skill set can plug. So you heard, he sets them up, even replaces himself in some cases. And I think that's such a beautiful way to view that scalability and that growth short and long term. So listeners, definitely check out the show notes. You can click right on through to his website, also linking to his personal LinkedIn. Otherwise, Ivan, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, I not only want to say thank you to you today, but I also want to say spasiba, diakuyu. Thank you so much for sharing all of these things with us today.
Thank you so much, Brian. Such a genuine pleasure, and I wish we had more time to dive into all these very fun topics.